I think this is an important journey as we dive into where we're going to launch from here. Start, I believe, at UUNET. And you go through, you name some of the most important in the mid-90s, literally building out at least what we think of as the internet today, taking it from universities and the military into this new thing. You're from Loudoun County area. You're making this happen. James Madison, proud grad. What in a few minutes? Like, what's that journey? Now it looks like what a rocket ship, but it might not have felt like that at the time. To get from there to here, where I'm going to pick it up with a different question. What was that? What was that like? Help us to understand that.
Yeah, so I went to JMU, graduated in '94, had grown up in Falls Church. Father was a Navy pilot and then ended up in the CIA. Back to your healthy skepticism.
The Christians
comment.
in Action, yeah.
I don't know that one. But anyways, when you have a Navy dad and a CIA dad, you have a little bit of skepticism.
Sure.
My wife always says that when I retire, I'm going to be a private investigator. So to your point about skepticism. But anyways, grew up in Falls Church. After JMU, I knew I wanted to go to a growth industry, right? I didn't, I had friends going into government IT, you had healthcare, you had, all these things up in Northern Virginia. But I went to my stepfather at the time, who was a stockbroker, and said, hey, what companies in Northern Virginia should I target? And he said, well, there's these two internet companies that are fast growing called UUNET and PSI. So I did what you do back then. If you really want to pursue something, you put your resume together and you fax it in. And fortunately, somebody pulled my resume off the fax that had gone to JMU and saw, oh, this guy went to JMU, let's talk to him. And they called me and I came in and interviewed and joined. I joined UUNET when it was 150 employees. And when I left 6 years later, it was 6,000 employees, which is kind of a theme that's been part of my whole career, which is scale, right? Growing things fast, entrepreneurial environments, fast moving, just get things done type mentality. But the UUNET ride was phenomenal. It gave me visibility into things like peering, how internet networks work. I was part of an initiative where we de-peered MAE East and MAE West, where...
Can I pause for 1 second? Because we'll do this if we're not careful.
Yeah.
Easily half to 2/3 of this audience know how electrons, molecules, and data work, but they have no connection to things like MAE East, MAE West, whatever. So as you tease this out, help probably 2/3 of the people that we're bringing on as junior people at QTS, wonderful electricians, but they're really not connected to those early stories. What is it that you're describing?
Yeah, I mean, so when the internet grew up back in the early 90s, it was kind of an experiment. It was research oriented. You had a dozen or so networks, and then all of a sudden there was revenue that was starting to be generated. Businesses were buying their first T1s. People were registering domain names. A lot of that stuff was going on through us. I mean, I sold as a sales guy there a lot of companies' first internet connections, hooking up their corporate LAN to the internet. Fundamentally, the way internet networks interact with each other, internet is a network of networks, is you have to have the packets from you to that destination transfer some sort of interconnection point called peering, right? UUNET would peer with PSI, and PSI would peer with Internet MCI, and they all peered at certain spots around the U.S. And peering actually led to why Loudoun County in Ashburn, Virginia becomes the data center capital of the world, and we can touch on that later. But basically you had, however many, 5 to 8 major peering points in the U.S. where internet networks were exchanging traffic. What happened when I mentioned de-peering is that some networks grew faster than others. UUNET and PSI and Internet MCI and some others were just rocket ships. We built out these sales teams that were super successful. We had great engineers. We built great product. And so we were just growing faster than anyone else. And peering basically means you're going to exchange traffic with someone that has equal amount of traffic as you. And so we don't have a commercial arrangement. We just do it for free, essentially, right? It's settlement-free peering is what they call it. But we had these smaller networks that were, essentially not the right size or not scaled like us. They weren't nationwide. They weren't making the same investments. And so I was part of a small team that had to have really tough conversations with those regional networks to say, hey, we're basically unplugging with you. And if you want to still connect to the UUNET network, you can buy transit from us. So, as a 26, 27-year-old, really tough conversations, which we have a lot of those now throughout our time as data center and single tenant salespeople. But, that was kind of my first foray into, tough discussions with customers. And most of them did convert, right? They became transit customers of UUNET. But that was an interesting time there.
Right.
I know we started with kind of my journey and how I got there. Let me just pause there and see where you want to take it from here.
Well, let's keep going. So as you move through that into, we're going to get to this word unprecedented later, but we keep hearing, I hear it all the time. I say it sometimes. It's unprecedented. And in the micro, it can feel like that for sure. But in the macro, it's we've never had more communication, said the first Abraham Lincoln communicating to his generals through, the telegraph over and over and over. Right now, I am literally talking and getting a real-time response to my mobile device as it's helping me shape a strategy or something. And so still communication, unprecedented. So as you're on this journey from UUNET forward to where we're going to land at QTS in a second, or data centers in a second, what did that look like just as you went through it?
Well, in terms of unprecedented, I think, and we talk about this all the time here at QTS when we're doing these big hyperscale deals, most of the problems that we have to solve are unprecedented, right? We're dealing with oscillation issues, spiky load, whatever you want to call it, an AI workload going from 0 to 100 megawatts like that.
Right.
And what does that impact on the utility? And how do you work with the utility to make sure it's not a negative impact, right? Do you use BESS? Do you use software? Do you implement StatComs into the utility? Like, these haven't been presented nor solved. And when you're kind of at the front end of some of this success in the data center space, you're the first to solve it, right? And so the same thing goes back to UUNET when we were solving deep hearing. That was the first time. We didn't know what the commercial arrangement would look like. We were just kind of making it up on the fly, right? It's kind of like I remember when Digital Realty Trust, and I got to give them credit, they helped kind of create the price per KW model that everyone adopted.
Yeah.
Right. And now we all sell power versus square feet. I mean, the data center deals that I was doing at Cable and Wireless were $10 to $20 a square foot.
Right.
And then Digital Realty Trust said, you know what? The biggest cost is the power infrastructure and the mechanical and everything. So we're going to sell. So that was unprecedented for them.
When did that happen? What do you remember about what years? Because I remember getting a call from a broker.
Yeah.
When I was with our buddy Tim Huffman. This is probably 2010. And they're like, tell me, what's your meter power? And we're like, meter power? All we had sold was branch circuits where you got the 20 amps or whatever. And we're trying to figure it out. Tim Keister, who's now over Stack. Like, all these names, we got these names that we've worked with or alongside. They're at other, worthy competitors. But I just remember us kind of sitting around scratching our head because Tim and I came from the colo world. We had no connection to the data center world, even the colo data center world before. We were an IT service provider really within a data center. And Tim, of course, was counsel. So when you were going through that era of Digital Realty and then later Cyrus One and some others really did this. But Digital Realty, I think, really was the sort of the one who laid the groundwork for
everything else was kind of retail up until that point, right? You were selling circuits or you were
Right.
selling cabinets, you were selling cross connects, and then they started doing these, 1.2 megawatt suites or whatever they were back
Right.
in the day. And I think that was probably circa 05, 06, maybe 07.
Yeah.
So throw that into the unprecedented category.
Right.
The reorganization at Cable and Wireless of CDN assets, data centers that were losing customers because they were all .com customers, and how to retain as many and consolidate, unprecedented. Fast forward to more of the issues today here at QTS that are power related, real estate related, NIMBYism and how to deal with some of those things, entitlements and permitting. I mean, a lot of these things, sure, they've been around in the real estate world for a long time with industrial and commercial and other things like that, but how they're manifesting themselves through the projects that we're working on to some extent are unprecedented.
Yeah.
For first time problem type solution things.
It's just listening to you now, which is a great reminder of why I wanted you to come on the podcast. With all due respect to our various sales leaders we've had over the 20 years or so, a little over 20 years at QTS, I don't remember very many of them being able to, or really engaging in some of the things that you just talked about. You're just talking about oscillation. Luke Saladega, who was on here the other day, CTO at VoltaGrid, before that, Oracle and the Abilene project, regular conversation for him to talk about oscillation or some of these other things. But for my sales leadership, it was not an area of sophistication that they really needed to focus in on. So now, as we come all the way forward to now, as a leader of that at QTS, what's the day in the life like? And where do you have to continue to expand that maybe is different than what you or somebody in that role would have had to do at a Cable and Wireless or a EdgeConneX or a whoever, QTS 8 years ago, 10 years ago? What is a day in the life and what's different? What's unprecedented in your world?
I mean, the thing that I've found interesting running all of sales here, and I saw it to some extent when I was VP of hyperscale, is that we function a little different than most software or services or whatever type technology sales organizations, to the extent that the leaders lead and the leaders manage and the leaders drive metrics, and they spend a lot of time, doing those things, kind of operational type managers. Given the scale and the dollar amounts of these deals, our leadership, including myself and all my VPs, manage the deal flow, because these are very senior level decisions. You're negotiating leases that have very material impacts to the business. There's financing impacts, there's operational impacts, there's SLA impacts, and a lot of these decisions are made at a C level or at an EVP level. And so I find a lot of my time and my leadership's time is spent in the trenches doing the deals, right? If I look at my calendar from yesterday, I was probably on 5 deal-oriented calls for, things that we're working on right now that we're, headed toward closure. My team, to some extent, has turned into sort of a lease execution organization, right? We've got a great multi-tenant business that we're trying to get more inventory for them. Federal business had its best year last year and is in a position to have an incredible year this year. They're headed more toward single tenant type business because a lot of the federal customers are getting their business through the CSP. So we're doing those engagements that way. And then the hyperscale team, of course, has just grown like gangbusters the last 5 or 6 years. But that's probably the most unique thing that I have found in this organization, that it's a lot of lease execution and it's a lot of in the trenches, which sometimes you have to pull yourself out of that and say, you know what, I need to go do some team calls. I need to go sit in with this group, and I need to spend more time sharing and communicating and leading. And that's something we try to do more of, but we're kind of in this golden age of data centers. And so you're really focused on getting these things over the finish line.
Yeah. One of the things I know, if I'm not careful, I probably blank out about it, but back in the 90s and in through the 2000s, we had, a lot of people will say the dot-com bust, but they weren't there. They know about it, like, I don't know, talking about some great thing that happened or I was at Woodstock. In fact, I heard somebody the other day that said, if everybody who said they were at Woodstock was actually at Woodstock, it'd be like 10 million people, right? But some of the lessons that I'm sure taught you was in that disruption, in that reckoning of what's real, what's not real. We know they weren't wrong. There was just we were early in a lot of ways. What did it teach you, especially as a person in the sales side of the business side of the technology? Who survives, who doesn't survive, what's real, what to get crystal clear on, and how does that apply now in the world that we're in now?
I mean, I think you have to get the strategy right first.
Okay.
Right. And I think we did that particularly well here at QTS in 2016. And I'll talk about that. But, and then to me, you have to build relationships with these customers. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I don't think it's that complicated, right? That's why a JMU grad can do this job and you don't need a Harvard MBA to do it, right? You just need to hustle. You need to outwork the others. You need to be persistent. And so those kind of like core, call them sales athletic skills, I have found prevail if you layer that in with really good relationship building. And, you know, it has to be part of your DNA. And that's the thing, again, that I go back to what attracted me about QTS is that it's good, wholesome, honest people here. That's kind of our DNA. And that's what attracted me here because I'm a culture guy. But if you mix the relationship stuff with kind of that sales athleticism on top of having the strategy nailed, then that's probably to me the biggest lesson learned throughout all of my career. What we did particularly well here is our previous CEO, you know, was pretty determined to figure out hyperscale. And, you know, part of that was, hey, let's create a dedicated hyperscale team. Let's strip away all these accounts that you were kind of, you know, living off of. Let's give you these 15 accounts cold because none of them were customers.
Right.
And that's the team that's going to go execute. We knew they were all talented salespeople. Let's go to the right regions. We were in the wrong regions. We were where the good real estate deals were. We weren't where the availability zones were. Right. So we just, you know, made the right decision to go get real estate where the availability zones were, which at the time were Phoenix, Hillsborough, and Ashburn. We needed to solve supply chain. We needed to solve a design, right? Like part of the challenge with those brownfield chip making plants or, you know, printing presses or Sears, Roebuck assets that we had converted into data centers is they had columns in all the wrong spots or they weren't the right size data halls, right? So we needed kind of a ubiquitous design and we came up with that, the Freedom design. We need to get the economics right. We knew we had the foundational operational skill set. We'd hired all these great ex-military folks that knew how to run submarines and aircraft carriers and, you know, manage the nuclear assets there. So we had this incredible reputation for running great data centers, but now could we build them, build the right ones, build them in the right spot, and then get, you know, economics right. And that's really the strategy part of what propelled the hyperscale success here at QTS. And then all the sales athleticism in my view.
Couple things to just add color to that. One, and you had to maintain your culture.
Yep.
And it was a small, like this was not, it was an important team, but this was not a big team. It was founder, CEO, tag, you, a few of your sales team. You had the ability, and that team had the ability, obviously, to pick up the phone and call anybody they needed, but they didn't, like they actually collapsed the group. They didn't, you know, and just said, you are literally the tip of the spear. Somebody, Jason Coe, said on a previous podcast in his world, and it sounds like it's applicable here, our plan B, make plan A work. That's it. Like this plan has to work. And now that we had a season there, really when I saw it come to fruition myself was sort of, in addition to that, we were public at the time. So they were, what's happening over here? We had a activist investor at the time in that spring. Like there was a lot of, we don't have to revisit all of it, but it was, we're all in.
Yeah.
This is either going to work or it's not. This is the team we got. This is the culture we need to maintain. This is the stubbornness we're going to go do. We like you said, none of these people were our customer, at least not in any material or meaningful way. We need them to not just, we put their logo on the door, like they are materially with us. Go do it. And we had disruption there in 2018 too. So
Well, we tell this story all the time. We implement the new strategy. We go get the land. We start flying out to Seattle and San Francisco, meeting with the customers, which were all receptive to us. Right? They were like, "Yeah, we know you guys are trying to figure it out. Here's what you need to do." And several of them coached us up on things to do. So we got to give them a lot of credit. But I remember about 12 months into it, and thank goodness our CEO gave us space. We hadn't sold anything.
Right.
And I remember going out to lunch with Tag, and we both sat across from each other like, is this going to work out? Like, are we the right guys? Like, and then within a couple of weeks, we had a 10 megawatt deal that we closed in Northern Virginia. And then after that, a couple more 5, 10 megawatt deals. And then we got our first couple single tenant deals up in Hillsboro, one in Richmond. We got a couple single tenant deals in Northern Virginia. And we were kind of off to the races. And that started to build our confidence. And then, of course, Blackstone buys us in 2021. And that was like putting, fire on the gas or gas on the fire.
Right.
Whichever one it is.
It reminds me of those bands. I'm going to be melodramatic, but those bands, we all talk about the Beatles' success in the 60s. What isn't spoken about by the casual music person is they were a cover band. They love Buddy Holly. They love the blues. They like these, they had their pompadours. Like this is, and this is what they did. And they knew they were onto something. They began writing their own stuff. But when they heard you talk about that 10 megawatt deal, or and I'm sure there's 1,000 analogies like this, they knew they were onto something when they heard their song on the radio. They were convinced. All of you were convinced. Maybe you were whistling in the dark, but you were convinced. We're not wrong. We may be early. It may be when we got the Richmond facility, which is an incredible story. But at the time, everybody was kind of scratching their head like, well, what's the connectivity there? Maybe we got an ISDN from like Culpeper or I don't remember where, but like there was no, we got a bone thrown to us from Bank of America. But and I guess my point in all of this is not the asset that eventually paid off because the sea cable landed and whatever. It was, this is the army you've got. This is the battle that's in front of us, which is not to say only do this. To your point, they were receptive. They met with us. They kind of liked us. It's almost kind of like, hey, kid, let me give you some pointers.
Yeah.
We'll see if they respond or not. And when that ride-through of our culture connected with our stubbornness, our doggedness, if we're being polite, but our stubbornness, I remember I've only had Tag's foot applied strongly to me a couple times in life, but I heard of a third, and it was either you want to be here or you don't want to be here, to a group of people. Like, we're either doing this or we're not doing it. You can't be half-hearted, because half-hearted people aren't going to survive this. And my plan is to survive this. And so it was I think that's part of just like coming out of those things that you did with all of those other organizations. You're one of the original employees of EdgeConneX and building that out, an edge data center. What is that? When people even today are scratching their head, what is the edge? And you get Phil and I debating what the edge is or isn't. And you go through all of those iterations even through now. And I guess the story we're trying to tell, or that I'm imagining there, is, as you guys say all the time, we do hard things. Like, we do hard things and we go through this journey.
Yeah, EdgeConneX, they deserve a lot of credit for being disruptors. I joined there when they had a dozen employees. Like, talk about startup. Like, me and 2 other guys were in an office together the size of this podcast room. Mm-hmm. And then the CEO and the COO and the CFO were in the office next to us, crammed in there.
Right.
And that company had almost failed twice before with 2 different business plans. They had been doing boxes at the base of cell towers for Edge, and then it was boxes in the basement of buildings for Edge. And then finally, one of their investors, who was a cable company out of Philadelphia, said, hey, why don't you build some Edge data centers for us nearer to the communities, and we'll put our cloud DVR near the communities. And that's where we went and raised money on that. And EdgeConneX was kind of off to the races. But what was interesting about joining EdgeConneX is that, I had the data center experience from cable and wireless, and to some extent from UUNET selling hosting there, and then a lot of network experience in between, and of course the recruiting diversion. But they didn't know data centers at all. I remember the CEO at one point asked me what a meet me room was, right? But that was to their benefit.
Right.
Because they were disruptors and they just thought about things differently. You're kind of seeing that with these Bitcoin companies right now that are getting to high performance computing. They're disrupting things right now because they just don't have the experience that the traditional industry like us and others have. But so that experience was a great experience from a learning perspective. One of the more interesting things about that journey was the model was to go get all these edge locations with the eyeball provider, which is the MSO or the cable operator, and then bring the content to the edge like that cable company did with its cloud DVR. So we were going after folks like Netflix and Facebook and CDNs and things like that.
Explain for people what a CDN is.
Content distribution network. Okay. It basically you take like your Apple iTunes or things that are often out to a phone or out to a user that just needs to be placed somewhere near the edge so that it can be sent to you quickly. Like when you go watch a Netflix movie, you're usually getting like the first 5 minutes of it preloaded because it's at a server nearby, and then the rest of it comes from a more centralized location. At least that's the way it was, 10 years ago. So EdgeConneX is on this journey to build all these edge data centers and match up eyeballs to content. Well, we got to a point where our success was being impeded by peering once again, where the content providers and the MSOs were fighting over peering. They wanted it settlement based. One party pays the other. And so that sort of slowed down the success there. But as good, scrappy entrepreneurs, we said, you know what? Why don't we take all these relationships we've built with Meta and Netflix and Akamai and go see where we can solve problems around the globe for them. And one of the very first deals that EdgeConneX did that was hyperscale was to put like a 30 megawatt data center in Amsterdam because nobody really had any capacity. So they kind of took Microsoft over there and said, where do you want it? Which I thought was pretty innovative, and they continue to do things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's the things you learn there are unbelievable. It's a lot of what we learned at UUNET. When I started here at QTS, it was only 300 employees, as you know. What are we now, like 3,500 and growing?
So as you're telling that story, and we're even just in this last comment, and I hate saying 30 years because obviously you started when you were 11. That's incredible. I also liked how every now and then you work on a James Madison athletic reference. Were you, remind me, you were tight end or scat back or what were you? You were something.
What the heck is a scat back?
I don't know.
Jeez.
Somebody said that to me the other day.
Yeah.
Somebody in the backfield. Were you played ball with them?
I was lightly recruited out of high school in Falls Church, Jeb Stewart High School, which has since changed its name. So I had like Division I AA, right. Division III, that level. And so I was like, do I just go, academic career or football? I actually had, I don't know if I've told you this, but I had sent in my $200 matriculation fee to Virginia Tech.
Oh.
I was just going to go there, academics. Right. But I had met with some coaches that were recruiting me, and JMU had been recruiting me for a tight end, not a scat back. And I remember, it's kind of humbling to say this, but the coach called me in May and said, hey, he hadn't talked to me for months, so I thought JMU had passed, right? Calls me in May and said, hey, I need another tight end. You want to come play here? I said, I'd love to. He goes, well, how did your application go? I got waitlisted. He goes, I'll go take care of that right now. And boom, I was there.
Wow.
So not only do you have a JMU guy leading sales, but one that barely got in, right? I mean, think about what we're experiencing with Blackstone, some of the smartest people on the planet.
Yeah.
Like unbelievable. And they work their tails off too, but, so they've got a perfect spot in what they do, which is, evaluate companies, make really good strategic decisions and make great investments. And it's been a great experience to get to know that kind of level of folks. I have always found that in the sales arena, those that are most successful are the ones that kind of didn't go to the elite schools. They went to a JMU. My VP of hyperscale went to Radford in Virginia. And they just have a doggedness to them, right? A persistence. They're fearless. They will make that phone call that everyone else will be like, you're really going to call that person? Yeah, that's how you get things done, right? They're very driven. They want to prove things to others. And that's kind of what I think my type background and others that we try to put on our team bring to the table.
When you look back, has there been a pivot that wasn't obvious at the time, but now, or maybe even later, became essential to how the business and the industry grew?
Specific to QTS,
yeah,
I would say, and to your question about it wasn't obvious, we were kind of accidentally doing it, and then it became the formula, and that is that we were building forward on certain sites. We were just buying the land, signing the ESAs with the utilities. We were starting to move dirt, and we were doing it all speculatively, right? We were doing it without a lease. And that's just because what we thought made sense, right? And so in 2022, 2023, it allowed us to capture, a very large deal down in Atlanta that came with many more buildings around the U.S. And right there, I think we validated that the formula, at least for the foreseeable future, to be successful with single tenant or campus size deals, is you needed to lean into it. Because what you're trying to do is solve a problem for the hyperscalers around time frame. They've got all the frontier models, the LLMs that are, trying to get revenue. GPUs and data center capacity are the bottleneck. And so we're trying to solve that part of the bottleneck for them so that when those models either come through the CSPs or come directly to us, we've already built something out and we can deliver faster than someone else. I mean, we always say nobody can build these data centers faster than the other. Like we're all using the same GCs. You've got the same pieces and parts. I would argue we probably have a better position with supply chain than others. So maybe if you have a long lead item, we're going to prevail versus someone else. But we're all building at the same, timeline. It's just a matter of who starts sooner.
Right.
And that was sort of what I think the turning point was for us figuring out our formula to win all this business that we've won and service these customers was doing that.
What don't people know about us still, do you think, that might surprise the world?
A lot. I mean,
that you can share.
No, yeah, I know. But let's just start with the fact that up until about June of last year, we were pretty quiet. We didn't advertise. We didn't market. We didn't send people to trade shows to speak on panels. We were pretty limited in that. So, remember our previous CEO was like, we're the little engine that could, right? So I think there was a lot of pride here of just kind of quietly having all this success without folks not knowing. If you went and asked the top 10 hyperscalers what they don't know about us, they'd tell you not much because they know everything about us. They know how well we build these data centers, how we build them on time or early, how we build them under budget. They know that we run incredible data centers. They know that we have great back office. A lot of these leases that you're doing are really complicated. They're triple net. There's a lot of moving parts to them. So are you going to make billing and the kind of commercial relationship easy? And we do that particularly well. I mean, I think they know that we're a really serious business. We were asked recently to help a hyperscaler with some best practices stuff around leases. And we put together a phenomenal white paper for them. I think the hyperscalers know all of those things about us. We've got great design. We're incredible with collaboration around engineering. One of the buildings we built down in Georgia was a bespoke collaborative design with a customer that, one of the first training facilities out there of such massive scale. So they know that about us. So the right audience knows who we are. But as you know, Dave, we are trying to speak to our constituents a bit more under David and Tag, right? We want to talk to the communities. We want to talk to the governments. We want to talk to the press. I think it's a time where it's more important for people to know not only all those great things that I mentioned we do and why the hyperscalers like the relationships with us, but also who we are and kind of some philosophical things. So you're going to see a lot more from QTS publicly, and you're already starting to see it, right? Like a lot more people are showing up at trade shows, on panels, more than you, right? I mean, TAG's been on a dozen panels in the last year.
Yeah.
So people are going to hear about QTS and from QTS a lot more.
In the era that we're in, there's only a certain number of factories available to produce product to supply people. There's only so much square footage, and why would I really want to be part of? There's only so many communities. Why would a community want? So not necessarily a generic, but if in there's any audiences that you can offer an advice for them to evaluate, that they don't just choose a data center, but they choose one. And I'm trying not to make this an infomercial for us, but just how would they do it? Like, what are they serious about? What are they good about? What would be your response to that?
Well, first off, I think the industry has a major messaging problem right now, right? As it relates to those constituents. I don't think the people realize that a cell phone and an iPad and a laptop equal a data center, right? I was having a discussion with my 21-year-old son, and he was, having an issue with some of the generation sources for utility, right? Coal, right? And then we got into a philosophical discussion about data centers. And I said, well, then just turn your phone and your iPad in and you'll be good, right? Stop creating the demand or, stop using the services. But I think I don't think that the communities understand that correlation. They just see it as a big building that's, it's ugly and it shouldn't be nearby. And to a certain extent, I agree with neighborhoods and communities. We shouldn't be building data centers next door to a community, right? Like we need to go places where we're welcome, right? And to some extent, I think that's probably in more rural areas or away from neighborhoods. I wouldn't want to live in a neighborhood where I looked over my shoulder in my backyard and saw a data center. And unfortunately, Northern Virginia has gotten like that to some extent. We probably need to chill out a little bit in Northern Virginia, but we need to go find areas where we are welcome, we are desired. Cedar Rapids is an incredible example of that. They want us there. We're bringing incredible economic benefit to the area there. We've got a great utility partner. Like that is a success. Go find more of those throughout the U.S. And then amplify the messaging around that. Talk about the benefits that it brings to the construction workforce, the permanent workforce that's going to operate these data centers that live in those communities, the tax dollars, all the great things that those communities that have data centers already benefit from. But then there has to be this massive collective message improvement across our industry. So QTS is trying eagerly to play our part. This summer we're going to be rolling out a bunch of new messaging through our marketing group that'll help speak better and more clearly to these communities. But I think it first starts with going where we're welcome and wanted. And so we're trying to work strategically to find those locations.
Yeah. I guess my question for you is, I didn't live in an era where we started moving from horse and plow to industrialized, but we were able to clear land in a way. And I would imagine, at least looking back, that people could get behind that idea because it was creating more food. Like there are very few places, there's no place in America, there are very few places in the world that doesn't have access to inexpensive food because of advances in agriculture, advances in technology, all of these things. It takes a fraction of the people. I remember asking somebody, well, what's putting you out of the business in terms of people to farm this? And they said, well, nobody wants to be a farmer. So John Deere, one of the largest autonomous vehicle makers in the world, is applying these things. The struggle for them is they don't have enough data sources near them or connectivity near them for them to do this stuff. So all of that to say, when we're able to correlate this is leading to human flourishing because it's land, if we were able to say in that building, research is going on that's doing climate change analytics, or in 10 years we'll solve leukemia for any child, I don't know that we'd get the same. And I'm not saying there aren't cat videos. Everybody loves to do cat videos. They're funny as heck, of course. But it's all this other, your Sheriff's 911 system is in there. The formula for Coca-Cola is in there. I feel like that's part of our messaging. And the gross part of it is, as I said to this person, is, well, you want this, but you don't want a data center, which is to say you want it in somebody else's backyard.
Right. Well, we haven't talked about AI at all.
Well, let's talk about it.
Right. I mean, I don't know if I've told you this, but I went out and met with OpenAI in 2017.
No.
Yeah. So when we brought over our one of our sales reps on that hyperscale team, he had been tracking OpenAI. So we went out and met with them. I think they had 20 employees at the time. So we'd been tracking them for a while. But I'm a huge believer in AI. And I work with the LLMs directly. And then we obviously work with all the CSPs. And, you know, it bothers me when I see CNBC and all the trade rags talking about bubbles and things like that. I mean, to you know, our discussion around my history and going through .com bubbles and things like that, what's wholly different with today is there's real revenue involved with it. And people are getting real value out of the service, right? And more people are signing up at incredible pace. So when you have that, and you can sustain that and you can improve that, then that's golden. Like that's the first part of the equation that drives all this build out.
Right.
Right. And so that's what gives me great comfort that will there be some mistakes made and some companies that prop up that aren't successful, and around the edges, will there be, you know, mini bubbles? Sure. Right. You know, somebody's going to mismanage something along the way.
Right.
But OpenAI and Anthropic and a handful others of frontier models, man, they are off to the races, and it's of incredible value. One of the funnier moments that you probably heard Blackstone talk about often is when they bought us in the prospectus or underwriting package, whatever it's called. They didn't even have the letters AI in it.
Really?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, remember they bought us in September 21?
Yeah.
And I think we started working our first kind of AI-oriented deal late 22. I remember when a customer called me and said, hey, there's 2 words that you need to get to know: inferencing and training. And we were like, well, what the heck is he talking about?
Metered power.
Right, yeah. What did we talk about earlier? Unprecedented?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that was fascinating to have to go out and quickly learn what all that meant. But yeah, I mean, and that's obviously where a ton of the growth is happening in the industry right now. I think that there's benefits to that, going back to our discussion around picking the right communities. That's a little less latency sensitive than some other things like we talked about earlier with the edge. So you can put those in more rural areas, which we're doing in partnership with some hyperscalers. So I think that'll hopefully help drive better perception amongst the communities out there for putting AI in more rural regions. But yeah, it's been a part of our success the last 3-4 years is AI. Yeah, we're still getting cloud business and tons of enterprise business, and federal's buying, and a lot of that's cloud. So the other services and applications are still growing like gangbusters, but AI's obviously been the accelerant.
Right. It's cool to hear and to see there are communities out there saying, we're not giving you we got to pass the sniff test. We're going to be skeptical. Be skeptical.
Yeah.
Let's evaluate it. And not just anybody should pass your sniff test, but do that. And I agree with you that where that works, and I think some of these that are really scared now and we're not able to really have a conversation that makes sense, some of those are going to call us back up, either of necessity, there's nothing coming, or they get more information and they're able to evaluate it more concretely, and they say, okay, maybe. And I'd love to talk to them too at some point in the future.
I mean, the job opportunities that we're going to present, and we are presenting in those communities, are very high-end blue-collar jobs. And to some extent, the jobs already in those communities are blue-collar jobs, right? So you're trading out one blue-collar job for another that probably presents a whole new set of problems, challenges, and experiences that you've never seen before that are probably quite intriguing, right? Liquid cooling, working with GPUs, working with these highly sophisticated buildings. I mean, super awesome and amazing challenges that have great wages. And so, yeah, to your point, I think once folks start to understand kind of the benefits, and it goes back to what we were talking about in terms of messaging collectively across the industry to these communities, I think you're going to see more invite data center operators into the communities, and that'll be one of the reasons.
Yeah. So when I got started, again, complete data center ignorant, I was an IT guy, working with IT guys in a data center company, and we were just fortuitous that we had these data center people, and we built over the years, and we continue to add, first culturally, but also technically excellent. But our philosophy had always been, we want to own it. We want to be part of the design process, part of the construction process, part of the operate it and maintain. And that traditionally, some components of those were outsourced. Well, just give us the building and we'll fill it with our people, or we'll own it and we'll outsource it to somebody else to manage it or do the maintenance or whatever. Why do you think having all of that under one roof has worked so well for us?
We did it historically because we just philosophically wanted to do that, right? We wanted to provide world-class service all the way around. What's interesting is, again, fortuitously, we're ahead of the curve on that, right? Think about what's going in these data centers. It's revenue generating, it's targeted advertising, it's enterprise applications. It's incredibly important to the CSPs or whomever's businesses. So it can't go down. And what's happening is not only do they want you to be the ones that design it, they want you to build it or manage the GC. They want you to operate it. While you're building it, they want you to do the fit out. They'd love for you to do the cabling too. I mean, they want one throat to choke. I mean, so that we did it that way historically, but the trend now for a lot of these single tenant deals and even the enterprise deals and quite frankly, the federal deals is they want it soup to nuts. They call it turnkey. They want you to do it all. And again, it goes back to the stakes are so high of what's going into these data centers, and the revenue and the dollar amounts are so large. I mean, these are billion-dollar transactions. And so they want you to do it all. And you've watched it, right? Like there have been a couple times where we were late on a trend, and that was probably at the onset of hyperscale.
Sure.
Right. But prior to that and after that, I think we've been kind of leaders on these strategic elements you're talking about to service the customer.
Yeah.
Right. Getting the right product, the right service, the right offering in front of the customer. I think we've done a really good job at that. And you're seeing it right now, by the way, with design. Right. We've had our Freedom design, which is, a 42 or 48 megawatt, block redundant, 1.5 meg block size, good size data hall type solution. And then we created a rapid design because of the desire to build faster. I mean, if you're going to build less, you can build faster. If you're going to build smaller, you can build faster, right? So we were building a little bit more of a trimmed down solution and propping up buildings in 8 to 10 months. We're getting significant interest from the LLMs and the CSP servicing the LLMs for that type of design. And again, that's us kind of staying ahead on some of these trends and, like we say in the hockey world, skating to where the puck is going. Is that right?
That's
Did I get that right? Skating to where the puck is going?
You should know. You got a family full of hockey players.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, we have spent almost our entire time talking about
data centers,
Jeez. QTS lore, operations, sentiment. Your job is to lead sales. How has this changed? I don't mean the complexity necessarily of the agreements and that, but you've still got to go get talent to help you prospect, whatever that looks like today, to do the blocking and tackling, right?
Yeah.
Whether they are eventual leaders, they're leaders now, whatever. What does that look like today? What's changed? What's still the same? What does that look like for people that want to be on the business side of this industry? Tag has said recently, I can't make everybody ready for everything, but I can get you to the right philosophy that you can handle anything.
Let me talk about the organizational strategy and then some of the skill set required.
Okay.
We've got approximately 90 people in the sales organization, and we've created a nice little progression path, right? We still have a couple inside sales people that are smiling and dialing and digging up leads for the enterprise team. Mm-hmm. Then we've got our enterprise, or we've got account management and enterprise, which are doing a lot of renewals, a lot of customer relationships, a lot of smiling and dialing, cold calling, trying to stay in front of enterprise customers. And then from there, we've got a strategic accounts group. Think of that as like mini hyperscaler. So a lot of the SaaS companies, other bigger banks and healthcare and things like that. And there's, 3 or 4 reps in that group. And then we have our hyperscale group. And so within the organization, we're trying to articulate a path from that inside sales rep up to hyperscale, right? And that'll take years to get there. But we've already proven to the sales organization, we've got a ton of promotions that have happened the last couple of years that illustrate our commitment to that. The other great thing is we haven't had a whole lot of turnover, right? Great culture, great support, a lot of problem solving, trying to feed the team with enough inventory, which is essentially the product, right? You can't create demand in our industry. You just got to kind of capture it. So you got to have that inventory out there in the right timing, like we talked about. And so that's how we're driving the organization. In terms of skill set, it's a whole different ballgame than it was 10 years ago. We are negotiating very sophisticated leases that almost requires you to be borderline paralegal skill set, right? Like you're almost developing VPs of sales level type skill set, and you've got to be really savvy at negotiating, right? Unfortunately, often you're saying no to a customer, right? I mean, there's a couple customers out there that their business card says strategic negotiator. I mean, what do you think you're up against when you see that?
Right.
Right? That's what they fancy themselves as. Right. And so we're not trying to win. Like to us, it's not a sport. We're trying to get to an end game as quick as possible. But we've got to protect certain attributes of the business relationship. We have to have something that's financeable. And so that's where you see us spend a lot of time negotiating so that we can have something that's financeable. We got to make sure we got proper operational risk coverage and things like that. But, the sales talent, and I think we're doing a much better job training and upskilling folks. It's really like a VP, almost borderline C-level skill set of business negotiation that's required, especially as you get up to strategic and hyperscale.
What's that common thread you're looking for when you see the beginning of that journey, long before it gets to the end, that you're like, oh, this person has this DNA, this stuff that is worth evaluate or worth watching, just like a talent for, the coach calls you up, did you apply yet? For my team, for my school, for my whatever, this is, I want to evaluate this. They got the seeds of doing this that I eventually, once they, as they move through and they survive that first culling, is there a common thread there?
Just JMU grads. That's it. It's that simple.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm probably not going to say anything different than you see in kind of other, I would say, elite kind of like technology sales organizations, like, a desire to learn, a really good work ethic. I mean, you've got to work your tail off in this industry. Like, there's not enough time in the day. Like I said earlier, we're kind of in a gold rush of data center capacity. So you have to try to get it while you can, which means you're going to have to put a lot of hours in. Some of those intangibles we talked about, doggedness, persistence, fearlessness, but you've got to have a good aptitude for learning too. I mean, it's complicated what we sell. You've got to quickly learn mechanical, electrical. Liquid is a whole new ball game. I really want people to study the chip side of the business and the AI side of the business, so you can kind of understand the whole stack, through the GPUs and CPUs, and so I know it's kind of sounds cliche. But again, it's not rocket science. I'm telling you, like, That's why you don't need a Harvard MBA to succeed at data center sales. You just got to have all these kind of sales athleticism attributes.
Yeah, right. I agree with you in that they have solution engineers, they have people that they could partner with. But what everybody wants to hear is you're not surprised by an acronym when you're in the room. You understand it. You know your product set. You've got a willingness to learn. I remember we've gone through, when we went through the cloud, QTS Once Upon a Time had its own cloud, and that was disruptive for people because we're like, look, you don't need to be a cloud expert. You have people in the room, solution engineers to an intermediate level, others to a much greater level, and SMEs in their various categories. But you should know the big idea, and you shouldn't be afraid of it. Like, embrace it. Some it comes more naturally, but embrace that. And one of the things that you all say all the time over in the when you were a member of, a leader of the HAT team, and now leader of sales is two things. We do hard things, and good days add up.
Yeah.
Not every day is a good day, but you string together a collection of good days in any competitive endeavor you want to imagine. Hard work with talented and principled leadership or whatever. And again, this may sound like an infomercial, but you look at any individual contributor or team, we're about to start the World Cup, that is going to be successful with maybe a break or two along the way.
Yeah.
Those are the things, but you're not going to escape it without work. And so if hard things is not in your DNA, this may not be the place.
It's also, to your point, a team sport.
That's right.
Big time. We did a 5 lease deal for 300 megawatts with a customer in March, and I sent out the congratulations note, and there were 60 people that were part of that deal. I mean, you've got tax, you've got risk, you've got real estate, operations, development, sales engineering, obviously legal. I mean, executives. And to your point earlier about leveraging talent and resources around you, one of the things that blows my mind about some deals that have been done the last year is the lack of resources that I know these providers have. Like they like one company did a deal up in Michigan for 1 gigawatt, and when I looked on LinkedIn, they had 5 people in the entire practice of data centers.
Right.
Like, I have 5 real estate attorneys on one deal.
Right.
Right. I've got 25 pre-development people. I've got, 8 permitting and entitlement people. The resources and the skill set that QTS has, in my opinion, is kind of unmatched. And I have friends at, a lot of our competitors, one we talked about earlier that probably has 3 real estate people, right? So that's also been a huge differentiator, is the resources we have here.
Before we start the next conversation another day, first, in an hour and a half that we've been talking, people listen to this and hear what you had to say. If they remember nothing else, what should they take away from this conversation you want to make sure they leave with? Culture.
You go back to my recruiting days and me seeking out a company that had this special culture. Our founding CEO created it. Our current 2 CEOs have grown it and propagated it. A lot of companies say culture. A lot of people say powered by people like we do. What is incredibly unique about this culture, and I've got examples of experiences that I've had here where I'm like, I cannot believe they just did that incredible thing for me. Mm-hmm. Like, that's happened to me a half dozen times here. Mm-hmm. That would never happen at previous companies. Mm-hmm. Rob, come on in here. Let's talk. We want to give you this reward for doing such a great job. I mean, I thought I was getting called in to be in trouble. And it was the opposite, right? Because that's what we're all conditioned to, or at least other companies are like that. Culture, I think, is integral to success. I mean, sometimes you may have a product or a service that just kind of flies off the shelf and the culture doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. But if you put together culture with a product that is well thought through and you execute on it, I mean, the sky's the limit. And that's the one thing that I love about QTS. And the best way to summarize it is that you are looking after your colleague here more than you look after yourself, and you practice it every day, and you treat each other well. And I've never seen it at any other company that I've worked for, But it's here at QTS. We're working really hard to preserve it as we grow quickly. But I would say culture is what's super important to me, and I think it's super important to success.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Seen it a million times. Rob Hopewell, thanks for coming on the QTS Experience.
Thanks for having me.
My great pleasure. And if you like that conversation, hit the like button. And if you loved it, hit the subscribe button. See you next time, everybody. Have a good one.